Okay, this one. I think you'll have some insight on this one.
Hmm.
But I wanted to ask you just a random one. The future of vintage video game shops. There's probably about a dozen within like 50 miles of me. And I would say like one or two of them are good. And a couple years ago, even like a year ago, people were starting to say like, oh, you'll see them start disappearing. But I kind of wanted to ask you, like, what do you see the future of, retro game stores? Because not even like the big players like GameStop or anything can really capitalize on vintage games. Like they don't have it down yet. Like
No,
Best Buy will never do it.
no.
So, in your opinion, what do you think the future is of retro game stores?
I think that if obviously I think it all depends on how well the retro video game store handles their inventory, handles their prices. So I go to Next Level, which is a friend of mine, Nick Militia.
Yep.
I go to his store quite often, and he has two things: great selection, great pricing. He's priced to move. He's not priced to sit on stuff. I feel like
Exactly.
when you go to these stores and everything's really high priced, it's those are the stores that I think are gonna cripple themselves.
Hmm.
I think that if you get stuff that it's priced reasonably and it's priced to move, you'll see some stuff happen. Um, but I think that's the catch 22 we're in. But I think as long as there are NESs, Super Nintendos, and Dreamcasts out there, there's always going to be a need for a retro store. Now, I
Yes.
know that we've seen GameStop starting to kind of lean into that a little bit. Uh, I think this weekend we started to see GameStop stores going out of business,
Hmm.
but the new stores are getting like a retro area where you can go in and play old school games,
Yeah,
and
it's
they're
like a
gonna
lounge.
it's like a lounge almost on them now. And that's like it's crazy because when I go to Nick's store, Nick has like a little lounge area where you can play old school games and stuff, and you could play the Super Nintendo or the NES and stuff. He has it set up so you could jump in and do that stuff if you so choose to. But so it's weird that they're taking a little bit from the retro stores to some
Yeah.
degree. I It's harder to me because we talked about this last week. Like, what does the future, like 20 years from now, what's retro games look like?
That looks like a weird cloud. Like I think consoles are going to start selling based on the digital library, which is nuts to me. But I was reading an article came out this past year. eBay reported different like sales, like trends and stuff like that. The N64 market has seen a 200% increase this past year.
Yeah,
And we start like you start doing the math on the ages, and like you start seeing like maybe like the people that were playing N64 are now like 20s and 30s. They have like disposable income. There's always going to be a market for nostalgia, and I think GameStop, it's too little too late for them. I think personally they should have been capitalizing on this before.
absolutely.
But the retro game I was talking about, the one that I said was good, they know the current trends of gaming. Like they're going out ordering limited run games, like stuff that some retro places don't do or don't like take advantage of. So I think that there will be always a market for that. But like you said, they can't sit on stuff. They can't have like a Mega Man in glass for years.
Yeah.
Like they just need to get it in, get out, get new inventory. I'm sure people are always going to a store selling something. It's just there's a level in quality obviously in retro game stores, but I don't really see them going away, especially in the future.
No, and, the thing is like I know that like Jamsey has the whole Wii U collection, right?
Yep.
And I was talking to him, and he was saying that Nick had told him because he was like, "What's next?" Jamsey was just like, "I don't know what's next," and he was talking to Nick, and Nick said to him, he said, "N64 is becoming the next big thing because there's not as many games, and there wasn't many hard to get games. Like when you
Yeah.
go to the NES, there's a lot of games that are like super hard to get."
It's like $2 or 2,000.
Yeah, you're not gonna. It's so hard to complete that collection,
Yeah.
and if you're going to collect, you want to collect because you want to complete that collection. N64 is not that difficult because I think there was only like 300 games in the library total, and there wasn't any of these really super hard exclusives to get. Where, with the NES you have like Little Samson. Little Samson's like a $900 game. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I actually saw it because Nick got 2 of them in a couple weeks ago, like about a month ago. Got 2 of them in. I'm like, so I got to look at it and hold it, and I'm like, oh my god, dude, this game goes for $900. He's like, yeah, man.
It's a pretty fun game too.
yeah. And then you even look at like even the Super Nintendo. You had that whole Earthbound situation where those games are impossible to get and they're super high priced. Yeah. So that's why N64 is kind of taken off where it is now. But when you look back, right, when you look back at things and you go, it's so much easier to jump into a retro library back then because everything works. I'm curious what the future is, and I wonder, like, I think that where the cutoff of retro is now, like, you might get some Wii U stuff that might become a retro type thing. Like, I think the Wii U is going to, at one day, turn into, like, the Dreamcast.
Yeah, I think Jams is sitting on a little gold mine right there.
I think so, too, because I think one day people are going to look back at the Wii U and go, man, this is such... There were so many good, great games on this console. But it was just, because of that gamepad, it had this stigma, and it hurt that console. Yeah. So, I just think that Nintendo... Where I think that retro gaming will probably stop. That'll probably be the last great one. Like, I think when the Switch is done... I don't know that there'll be a lot of retro for that because, like we talked about, updates. And there's certain games that just won't work because of that. So how do you turn around? Like, if you... Let's put it this way. If I walked into a store and I was like, hey, man, I want Earthbound on the SNES. And you're like, hey, man, it's $500. But there's an opportunity that might not work. Might not be able to play it.
Yeah.
It's not that value of $500 isn't there no more, No,
you're right. It's gonna end. I think the Wii U is the last like retro Nintendo console because I'm not gonna buy a Switch. I've seen personally how the Switch is made. It's not really a for the long term type console. But yeah, like I think complete in box collecting is like the new thing now. But I think nostalgia is gonna run out even on the Wii U because like. The NES now is like diving. Like the prices are going away on that. So obviously, the N64 is like the big thing now. In a few years, the Wii will be big, and like then it'll be Wii U or GameCube. So I see some stores surviving, especially if GameStop goes out, because then where are you going to get physical? Because they still sell Wii, Xbox 360 games. Yeah. So it becomes, where are you going to buy it? And eBay is like full of scalpers and stuff like that. So the good ones will survive, but I think we're living in the modern age right now. I think the Switch is going to be collectible.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think we're hitting the end of that retro type thing, and I really believe that like kids that are born now will never experience what we experienced going into retro game stores. Like that is going to be a thing of the past, and they won't get what it was. Like they won't understand what it was. It's almost like when I was a kid and I would go into a comic book shop, right? And I'd look at the new and the shiny stuff. And my dad would be looking at the walls at the $50, $60 comics because he remembers reading those when he was a kid. Yeah. And he would be like, hey man, you want to get one of these? And I'm like, nah, I don't want that. It looks bad. It looks horrible. Smells, it's just not good, And then like he would buy stuff anyway to make me go read. Like, yeah, check it out. Just check it out. And the book, like, they weren't great storylines, and they were decent stories, but it wasn't like what I was reading at the time. And I feel like that's a very similar thing. Like, you're going to hit a point where kids are just like, what's the point of going back and playing Mario? Yeah. Like,
I mean, even myself, I would rather play an NES Classic 1,000 times over than like going to get an NES. And I know that might hurt your soul a little bit, but like,
no, because I know it's expensive.
Yeah, the Super Nintendo Classic I think is perfect. Like if I have that little itch to play those kind of games, I'll plug that in. So I'm starting like thinking this way. So I can't even imagine the future, the digital millennial little kids.
Well, the other problem too, Pat, that I don't think we're even taking into consideration is one of the other reasons why you don't want to do that is, dude, if you buy an NES, right, how do you play it? Because it doesn't hook to our TVs. It's rare that you find an HD TV that you can actually plug in and work to read the
That's
signal for an NES. You know, you have to have a CRT TV. So it's.
I mean, I'm a weirdo who still does and still watches VHS, but I'm not. I'm not the majority.
Yeah,
of that.
but you're also tail end.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like you're also that kind of like cutoff age where generations that are coming after you, like I don't see your brother doing that stuff. Your little brother. Like I think he's done. Like that's the cutoff. Like that's over. Like that generation, I don't see them. Like the kids that are playing Fortnite right now. Like imagine that, right? Imagine this. Imagine spending all your childhood, right, playing a game like Fortnite.
You're making me sad. I know where this is going.
And then 20 years from now, you can never play Fortnite again.
That's it. The servers are done.
Yeah. It's like this is a game that revolution in theory is going to revolutionize and go down as one of the greatest revolutionary games of our time period in gaming. And people 20 years from now will never be able to play that game.